Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at Crosstalk from Nauvoo Games. That's Nauvoo Games, not Nabu. Let's not bring back those memories. Crosstalk is a competitive team-based word game. One player on there's two teams. One player on each team is a clue giver. The other one or more people on the other side of the team is a guesser. And this sounds familiar, right? You are trying to, as a clue giver, you're trying to get the rest of your team to guess a specific word that you have, and you're doing that through private clues and public clues, and maybe even giving some subtle or secret hints as well. Even though I know that it does sound very familiar at this point, there are some differences from what you're probably thinking of. Let's go ahead and take a look at it, then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Crosstalk is a competitive team word game for 4 to 8 players, though you can play with more by sharing components. In each round of the game, each team has one clue giver and one or more guessers. The clue givers for each team are trying to get their guessers to correctly guess a word or phrase through both a private clue and public clues, as well as using special hints when possible. Every correct guess is 1 point, and the first team to 5 points is the winner. One team is the blue team, and the other team is the black team, and they will each take their corresponding boards and markers. A communal board is placed in the center of the table to keep track of each team's public clues and their score. Decide which player on each team will be the clue giver, though this should alternate every round. Clue givers get a private clue board and a marker, as well as a hint board, which is optional and should not be used if you're new to the game. We'll explain that later. Every guesser gets a marker and a chat board. Chat boards are a way for the guessers on a team to communicate privately by writing notes to each other, therefore not revealing information to the opposing team. They're useless in a 4-player game with only one guesser on each team, so you just won't use them. Keyword cards will give the clue givers their word for the round that both teams will be trying to guess. Each card has a different colored front and back so that you can go through all the cards once using words from one side and then switch to the other side. Notice there is no rhyme or reason to which words can be keywords. They can be single words, compound words, phrases, proper nouns, or even acronyms. The game also has a die that may be used for deciding keywords and a timer, which any player can optionally choose to flip over if they feel another player is taking too long to make a decision, forcing them to come to one before the timer runs out. A round starts with the clue givers drawing one card from the stack and then deciding together which keyword to use, without showing the guessers the card or giving any kind of audio or visual cue as to which word is being chosen. If they can't decide on one, the clue givers will roll the die and use whichever word corresponds to the roll. The keyword chosen here is Prison Break, which may refer to the act in general or the terrible, terrible TV show. Next, both clue givers will simultaneously and secretly write a private clue down on their private clue boards, appropriately enough, then hand it face down to the guessers on their team. Only those teammates may see it, and it may not be said out loud. All clues in the game must be a single proper word, must not contain any word from the keyword itself, cannot be an acronym, must be in English, and can't be a word that's always capitalized. You also can't use verbal or visual prompts to try and give extra information to your teammates. In this example, Team Blue wrote sell, and Team Black wrote escape. Next, the clue givers will alternate turns, writing public clues onto their side of the public board. These follow the same rules as private clues. But when a clue giver writes down their public clue, it's the opposing team, not their own, who will get an immediate guess. In this way, the clue giver must not make their public clue so amazing that the other team gets it right away, based on the private and now public clues that they have. In this example, Black's first public clue is time. The Black team now has escape and time as clues, which may even be enough right there to make a correct guess, but they do not guess first. The Blue team guessers may first take a shot at the keyword. Time and sell, their private clue, will absolutely get Blue to prison, but probably not prison break yet. There is no immediate penalty for an incorrect guess, so they could take a shot, but guessers may pass in order to avoid giving the other team too much information with a wrong guess that nevertheless may have been partially correct. Then the roles reverse, with the other team's clue giver writing down a public clue and their opposing team guessers either guessing or passing. When one team makes a correct guess, the round ends and they get a point on the board. Then you'll reset. New clue givers are chosen, presumably, or the same ones keep the job, and a new keyword card is drawn. Keep going until one of the teams gets to 5 points and immediately wins. In future games, you could optionally use the hint board, which adds another wrinkle to the mix. Once during the entire round, after your teammates just guessed or passed, you as a clue giver may use your marker to give one hint using that board and hand it face down to your guessers. This requires memory and intuition. Let's say, in our example, the first public clue given by blue was show, and the black guessers did not guess correctly or they passed. Then, the second public clue given by black was fence. The blue guessers either take a shot and fail, or they pass. The blue clue giver, which is really hard to say, immediately grabs the hint board and puts an X through public blue clue number 2, which is also hard to say, then hands it secretly to his guessers. What he's doing is telling his teammates to ignore the clue he's about to give, because his plan is to throw the other team off the scent. Blue's next public clue is forever, trying to coax the black team into perhaps guessing life sentence or hard time or something like that. Of course, the blue clue giver does not know about the escape private clue that black gave at the beginning of the game. And he's hoping that his team's guessers, who now have sell, time, show, fence, and are ignoring forever, will be able to put together prison break regardless of what black's third clue is about to be. That, essentially, is Crosstalk. Well, yeah, it was inevitable. In the wake of Codenames, which is like the biggest, people keep calling these games party games. I hesitate to call them party games because you can play them, in my opinion, it's better with a smaller number of people, and they just don't feel like party games to me, but okay, fine. In the wake of Codenames, there have been a number of other party games that are trying to imitate its style and substance, and just the same way that Cards Against Humanity, despite it being a clone of Apples to Apples, inspired tons of other party games just like it afterwards. There have been more and more Codenames clones coming out. But I really would urge you to not hold that against Crosstalk, because I liked Crosstalk quite a bit. Despite how similar it is, guesser, clue giver, word, figure it out by giving non-audio clues and things like that. There are some significant differences, and it just feels different from round to round. I would say that where I would always bring out code names for new gamers, casual gamers, and when I just want something very quick, I would bring out Crosstalk for people I was more familiar with and who are maybe more familiar with gaming in general, and if I have more time. I hesitate to say that it is a more like complicated and strategic game. I guess it is, but there's a little more there, a little more substance to Crosstalk, and I do think that sometimes that can get in its way. The whole aspect of we give a private clue, then we give the public clues, but you give a public clue and the other team guesses. That's a hard thing to wrap your head around the very first time. None of it feels very intuitive, but it is actually quite clever. There's always got to be some sort of mitigation of how obvious do you make a clue knowing that your team is not going to be guessing first. That's a very interesting aspect, and it reminds me of games like Dixit, where you have to give a clue, but it has to be within a very specific range of not being too obvious, but not being so hard to figure out that you can't get some people to guess it. And in this case, you have a very particular group of people you need to guess it, and a very particular group of people you do not want to guess it. And you have to be in that range. And that's probably the most interesting aspect of Crosstalk. I do think that the hint boards should be played with all the time after your first game. First game, don't bother with it. It's too much. But after that, always play with the hint boards. It's not like a terribly game-changing thing, but it adds just a little bit of a wrinkle to it, especially when you see the other team, you see the other clue giver secretly do something on that board, slide it over, and you're like, well, what did they do? Like I gave an example that actually happened with us, and obviously the circumstances were a little bit different, where the clue giver said, basically gave a hint saying, ignore what I'm about to write. And that's a thing that you can do, but you better hope that it doesn't backfire on you. And or it just might not end up mattering, because again, everything is timed very specifically in this game. When you give a public clue, the other team is guessing. When your team has just finished guessing, then you can give a hint. This is one of the reasons why it's a tenuous structure that this game holds up, where there's all these little very specific things, and it can be unintuitive, and it feels kind of clunky the first time you play, but once you get it, it's very clever in how it all sort of works together. I love that there's a ton of cards. There's lots of cards. There's like 6 different options on each face of the card, and I make a special note of this because other party games I like, well, Concept really is more of a party game, but Concept is the example I was about to say, where I'm dying for more cards. But I'm thinking of ways to improvise and find other sources for just clues and phrases we can use. But this game, you don't have to worry about that. There's so many clues, and how people get to the answer is going to be so different every time that even if you reuse them, it doesn't really matter. And the components are okay. I can't really complain about them. With the dry erase markers, you'd have to do this annoying thing of taking off plastic sheets off of them the very first time you play, but other than that, it's fine. And it's just a slick looking and slick behaving game, so to speak. I don't know that this is going to replace Codenames for anyone, and I can imagine some people who really love the whole, the spatial element, the grid of cards and putting the pictures down, that aspect of Codenames that people really like, and so this game can look a little bit boring compared to that. But I think there's a place for both of them, especially if you really like word games. Definitely, I can see people saying, okay, this is a Codename situation, this is a Crosstalk situation. But either way, I think both games are great, and I think you should definitely give this one a shot if you're at all interested, because it might surprise you. That is Crosstalk from Nauvoo Games. Check it out.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.